Welcome to episode 94 of Genn and Millie, where a Gen Xer and a millennial share the strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess. It's been so long.
So long.
Remind me, last episode, February?
First week of February. Yeah, February 3rd, I think.
Person.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in a month-ish.
A lot.
When I chose my word of the year, I thought it was going to represent me being in control of the chapters of my life, or a new chapter. And it turns out what this season is showing me is that maybe my new chapter is not control.
Okay.
But it feels good. It feels like I am with confidence, trusting, releasing control. So it doesn't feel like a hippie sort of, I'm just going to float around. It feels like releasing attachment to outcomes.
Love that.
And so I wanted to start our conversation today. And I love that you allow me control here.
Yeah. For the record, listeners, I have no idea what we're talking about. Zero. Not even a word, not even a construct, nothing.
I just realized in this container that you and I have that you give me the reins of introducing a topic that intuitively feels right to me. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but it comes to me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our words of the year come to us. This came to me. I'd kind of been brewing on it a little bit over the weekend, but then my Simple Abundance reading, as most of our listeners know, I've been reading Sarah Brethenach's Simple Abundance for 25 years, almost 26. Lauren will be 26 tomorrow. And it always has something different. I've been reading a lot of Young Pueblo, but my mornings seem to often have a message that I need to hear. So I've been thinking about my word of the year, and I would like for you to think about your word of the year as I read this.
Okay.
So, where you are right now, we're, 3 months-ish in. March 21st, Simple Abundance. What is self-confidence? My after 40 face felt far more comfortable than anything I lived with previously. Self-confidence was a powerful beauty potion. I looked better because I felt better. Failure and grief, as well as success and love, had served me well. Finally, I was tapping into that most hard-won of youth dues, wisdom. Many women confuse self-esteem with self-confidence. For me, self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves in the sanctuary of our soul. Do we love, accept, and approve of ourselves unconditionally? Do we believe that we're worthy of the love of others and the best that life has to offer? The quality of our self-esteem is deeply connected to the relationship with our first and most important critics, our parents. If they unconditionally loved, accepted, and approved of us, then we probably do too. But self-confidence is a special elixir that Spirit has prepared each one of us to face and surmount the challenges of life. It's an aromatic blend of invigorating essences, attitude, experience, knowledge, wisdom, optimism, and faith. If we were fortunate enough to grow up in a loving, supportive home and our self-esteem is strong, we learned our own homeopathic formula early. But if we did not, then we need to learn how to mix our own custom blend. What's important to realize is that self-confidence is available to all of us. And here's the most important part, Tess. An optimistic attitude is essential to self-confidence. So is learning from our mistakes and recognizing that everything in life can be used as a lesson once we're willing to be taught.
Okay.
So when my grippy, control freak self chose chapter as my word of the year, I believed that I was going to, with intention, apply it to what I wanted to apply it to. For example, writing for others. The stories chapter, which I have not done crap with. All these different things that I feel like, I'm going to own this word and I'm going to make it my own. And as we know, our words
Yep.
tend to decide differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I have since we talked last, gone through abundant change and learning of things from a lens of, wow, didn't see that coming, not within my control.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about that related to confidence and optimism and self-confidence, I was thinking about the grippy control demonstrates my strengths out of balance. It demonstrates my word of the year out of balance.
Sure.
When I lean in and trust and truly use my strengths as superpowers and say to this new chapter, you show me, I am more likely to be actually confident because the lessons are presenting themselves. And when I was thinking about the tie-in to the parent piece, like that's what we do as parents. Like we try to teach them the things when it's actually the lessons that they receive on their own that are the teachers. So my elixir of self-confidence did not come from how I grew up. It came from the failures, the losses, the abundant examples of you're not in control, the abundant examples of didn't see that coming. And what I found myself in the last month was where I used to get pissed off. I have come to a place of, well, let's just turn the page and see what's next. And that is self-confidence for me.
Wow, that's good. That's so good.
So I want you to think about and try to express your word of the year in that place of when it's in balance or out of balance, confidently, growth mindset-ish. But I thought this episode might be a good reconnect to our words of the year because we're a quarter in.
Yeah, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. I got back from spring break last week. So I am well over halfway done with my second semester, close to being done with my first year, which is insane, right? That's insane, how time works. And I love this question, and I trust your intuition because it is usually synchronous with mine, even if we haven't talked for 6 weeks. And I've been thinking a lot lately about actually self-confidence, and confidence specifically, and journaling through the fact that I innately have a lot of confidence in myself, and that I think partially comes from having high self-assurance. It partially comes from my thinking themes that use sources and information and external validations of what I'm thinking, right? Like in my way, that's like an empirical check that I know what I know because other people believe, can prove the same things. And so, both from external validation as well as just an internal drive, I just have naturally higher confidence. I'm realizing more and more than other people. And it's something that I am, personally kind of grappling with within my friend group here that, obviously I go through times where I question the decision to get my PhD because it's a whole lot of time and energy and investment. But I think overall I walk away with a lot less of those times than other people. I'm realizing more and more as I have deeper and more intentional conversations with my friends here. So personally, I journaled about it yesterday, actually, about this kind of, it's kind of crazy. Yes, there we go. And we're back. I think in the context of my word of the year, it's an interesting question because you said how does your word of the year balance? That's the word you used. And my word of the year is kind of balance, right? Like equilibrium came from a place of striking greater balance. And similar to you, but not in the exact same way, I think I personally have been trying to figure out how it's showing up. I think it hasn't been as prevalent or central as integrity for last year or hope for the year before. Words that I loved and felt called to, but that like literally smacked me in the face all year long. Like it was crazy how those words showed up. And equilibrium has been more subliminal and more subconscious in its manifestation in my life this year. And I think back, and there have been definitely intentional choices that I've made. I recall one day last week after I had a lunch with a friend, and I had a lot of work to get done, so I was planning on going back home and studying for a while. And I walked out of that lunch, and it was the most beautiful day. And so instead of biking north back to my apartment, I biked down to the National Mall, and I actually saw the very first magnolia blooms. Cherry blossoms hadn't bloomed at that point. They're just starting to. But I saw all of the other early blooming trees down by the monuments. And it was such a blissful afternoon and exactly what my heart and my soul needed. And, small moments like that, opportunities that are presenting themselves. I think, though, what I'm finding is, equilibrium came to my heart and to my gut with kind of those ideas in mind, right? Of when I'm presented with a crossroads, I make the choice to take these moments of being present and taking these moments to step away from work and my little Howard bubble to kind of strike this balance, right? But it's manifesting itself more and more in a balance within my work rather than a balance between my work and times of non-work. Prioritizing what needs to be prioritized, because are we surprised? I'm at the point where my life is totally full again and I'm not at the slow rhythm that I started the program with last semester. And so I'm having to prioritize my schoolwork as well as my work with my research and my fellowship and assistantship, but then also all of these other research opportunities that are coming my way, which is really, really great. And I love it. And having equilibrium at the forefront, though, has allowed me to really examine each opportunity to say, is this something I can wholeheartedly respond to? Is this something that is going to continue to keep this intention at the forefront? And is this something that also is the best use of my talents, right? Because there comes a point where I think part of how self-confidence has manifested for me is in the fact that I've been more discerning about, I say yes to a lot, but I've been more discerning. Even in my last few years in Omaha, I stepped away from the things I said initially an enthusiastic yes to, because as I was in those places, I realized that they are not the best use of my talents. And I want to be able to serve my church and teammates and my community and my friends in a way that presents that I get to show up as my best possible self. And so it allowed me to finally start to say no to things, and in the contexts in which I wasn't able to show up. Maybe I could do it, maybe I was good at it, maybe I was just filling a gap, when someone wasn't available or wasn't there. And I can do that, and I can have the energy to say yes to that. I know I'm a high energy person and just tend to take on a lot. But there's been a lot of, in terms of my years of waiting well, my year of hope, my year of integrity, all these words of the year, as I look back on the patterns that led me to my year now of equilibrium, it has been a momentum to saying the best yes possible in order to show up in the best way in each of those spaces. And I feel like I'm so lucky because now in this context, I'm literally in a context where my best possible self is present, right? Like I am in a learning environment at a university, studying and researching. So it's a context in which my best self already is present. Right? Mm-hmm. But equilibrium now is having to discern between the even more nuanced definitions of where my best self is going to show up, because it's already here, because this is my passion and my purpose. And so now I'm having even more difficult choices about what to say yes to. And I feel like that's really where it's showing up right now.
I feel like we should do and this could be a piece of artwork, a linear, like a time map, a timeline of our words of the year, because how much they've contributed.
Yeah.
So what I keep hearing from both of us is choice. And I think that was my 2014, maybe?
Later.
18?
It
Word of
was
the year?
18.
Math is hard.
It was 18 or it was 19. I think it was 19 because we talked about it in the new office.
18 was worth?
I think
19
so.
was, well, anyway. But how these words bring these lessons.
Yeah.
So I was jotting down notes, as I often do. The choice that is so evident to me is, I mean, first of all, you know your best practices. That's key. That's 90% of the consulting work and coaching work that I do is reminding people to create their own best practices. It is the simplest of simple. Like, if you know that at the end of the day, your bookend is to watch 5 TikToks that make you laugh, do it. That's a best practice for you. I mean, I have clients that I coach to walk in and out of who worked from home in the height of the pandemic, to walk out their door and in their door, to like physically have
the boundaries of the
ritual
day.
reminder. So like, okay, best practice is knowing your best practice, but also the choice of optimism. And I was thinking about this really heavy duty Sunday because Maria Shriver, I bask in her talent. She wrote about a friend had come to her and said, some people just don't choose happiness. Like, some people choose to be miserable and pissed off. And Maria, when she gets a question from a friend, she like mulls on it all week, and then it helps her write her column on Sunday.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, like, do people actually do that on purpose? Or is it a result of trauma? Is it a result of not knowing best practices? Is it a lack of optimism? That then prompted me, this is how my brain works, prompted me to think about the show Afterlife. Have you seen it yet? Ricky, I won't say his name right.
Gervais.
Gervais. Ricky Gervais. Like his face. Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais. I had to learn how to say towns in Colorado the same way. Like, Arvada sounds like Nevada. Like, yeah. So, Ricky Gervais.
In her face. Yep.
He's the star. He also wrote it. It's about this man who, I mean, I'm not giving anything away because you can watch the previews and know about it. His wife dies, and he is just pissed off, and he believes that he has found the secret to life is, I can be an absolute asshole to everyone, and no one can do anything about it because I'm already wishing I was dead. I don't want to exist anymore. He has multiple, suicidal ideation. I mean, it's a really tough dialogue, but he makes light of it in a way that makes it so much more understandable. It's hopelessness that he cannot get out of, so why not just completely lean into it and ruin everybody else's day? And he does it with fervor and energy and humor. And it is a really, really good show. It's very funny. I just finished the first season, and I almost want, before I start the next, I almost want to go back and watch it again to catch more nuances. I loved it that much.
Wow.
But it, as you would predict, he comes to places of optimism that are brought by others.
Yeah.
He learns these lessons along the way. I mean, they're just, Tess, you would love it for 1,000 reasons, but I was hesitant about it. I needed a new show. I need something that's like going to get me between now and the next season of Ted Lasso. Like, I needed something that I have to cry sometimes and I can't get it out. And I need something that would help me with that, but also leave me not feeling wrecked, but hopeful. And that show does this. And then what you just said about spring blooms. And I think about that. All of us exist in a place of seasons where, we come out of dark and snow and cold. We start noticing those spring moments. I can smell it. I'm so sensory sensitive
Yeah.
that the change, I think that's part of the reason I love the change of the season so much, is it honors all my senses. I hear the birds, I smell rain,
Yeah.
I feel the change in temperature, and I get that in my run time. That then made me think of, boy, I'm just like a trajectory today.
I'm just
I
like
read a-
watching your connectedness in your mind.
I read a beautiful piece via On Being. It's called The Pause, and it comes out each week. And it's usually Krista, but sometimes there's another guy that writes it. But she shared this other writer, damn, I won't be able to think of her name, Christy something, who she interviewed for this week's On Being podcast. But she wrote this piece about your 8-year-old self. And she had this writer had a conversation with another writer. And this writer talks about how she goes and presents and she in classrooms to students. And she says, have any of you read Charlotte's Web? You know, and all these hands go in the air. And then she's like, how many of you cried? And all these hands go in the air. And so she was sharing this with another writer friend, and her other writer friend said, I read that book over and over and over and over and over as a kid. And they were talking about knowing the ending is not good. Knowing that. And yet they kept rereading it. And she said it wasn't because I didn't know the ending. It was because I could face the ending, and it was yet so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just, I'll send it to you, Tess, so you can link it
Okay.
to our podcast notes. But do we have podcast notes?
Sure. Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah. Sorry, we've done this so long.
So
it is
it's a-
Kate DiCamillo.
Close. Christy. Kate. Gosh, when my emotion gets up here, I can't get around it. My throat chakra is needing a release. Anyway, I was thinking about that piece and how, like, our 8-year-old selves were so much better at this. Like, we would wake up with optimism, even if we knew things weren't going to turn out great. We just went in with, like, this mystery and twirly sort of dynamic of, what will the world bring to me today? And that, to me, to circle back to your words, is wholeheartedness. That is wholeheartedness. When we know not everything's going to be sunshine rainbowy, and the best yes possible. When we give and gift those, when we give someone our time and our energy and our talent, or we give someone our heart, or we give someone our music playlists, when we gift that to someone not knowing how it's going to turn out, and you can name that for any interaction that you have, simply not knowing is confidence. I don't have a freaking clue. And yet, like, that ties into tremendous joy for me, because what I think I should have chosen as my word of the year is mystery. But it's tying into, like, this new chapter is just, it's a mystery. But I think I went into it thinking it was going to be a well-written piece of nonfiction that I was in control of.
Biographies. Telling other people's stories. And now it's mystery.
Maps, encyclopedias. Like, I went into this word of the year thinking I am in control of what I am going to experience. And that is such BS. Like, I knew that. But now I'm like, oh, this chapter is revealing itself to be this grand mystery. And I think the greatest revelation so far is where my confidence lies. It's in trusting the universe to show me what's going to happen, and it's allowed me to ungrip. I think if you ask my kids lately about their interactions with me, they're like, oh, weird. She seems lighthearted. She seems like she's not going to tell us what to do. It seems like she trusts us. It seems like she is leaning in. And I am. And that's such a new chapter for me.
Yeah. It's liberating.
It is. I'm so bad at the way I tie things together. Also, you know that I listen back to these episodes. I have a real problem not finishing sentences.
I know.
It's an issue.
I know.
I know you know this. I'm going to say it to the listeners one more time because I listen to other podcasts and they finish sentences.
They finish
I
their
do not.
sentences.
And I'm sorry. I am sorry, listeners. I feel like you know me. I don't know you, all of you, but I feel like you know me because I reveal a lot here. I'm sorry that I do not finish sentences. This week we have a gentleman here called Mountain Wave Weather. He predicts the weather to like a fabulous following. It's kind of like a cult following almost. This guy lives in Castle Rock, and my friend Kim saw him at the brewery. She was like, "You guys, Mountain Weather is over there." So I said to Kim, that dude should get t-shirts because I would absolutely rock his merch. I'd be like, I am here for Mountain Wave Weather. He, every single time that he predicts weather, he says, I don't really know that this is going to work out. I got a model that shows this, and I got a model that shows this. Somewhere in the middle, but we just love him. But he gets on and like gives his best guesses, but then almost invites you to the mystery in a way that is confident but not showboaty, and we trust him. And most of what he's saying is like, I don't know. And I thought about that. I thought, oh my gosh, like, I feel confident about him saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what we need more in leaders. That's what we need more in humans today, is to say, I don't know, but I can lean in and I can trust and I can try.
Yeah, like here's the info we are working with, right? But there's a whole lot that we don't know. And a whole lot that we will never know, right? I mean, we get that in social science all the time, and you understand as a social scientist, it's like, in some ways humans are predictable and we can chart patterns and we can look at how they've worked in the past, but in other ways, people make erratic decisions that are illogical, right? And so like, how do we make sense of that, right? Like, how do we, I'm dealing with religion and politics and climate change denial right now in my research. And so like my whole brain is mapping onto like how all of these things relate together, right? Like how can you, like the contradictions, right? Like we live in a series of contradictions, right? And so they don't always make sense. And so they aren't always logical. And so we don't always therefore have clarity in terms of what's to come or what might happen, be it in the weather or be it how people will respond to major events that happen in our world. And I mean, you can see that with what's happening in the Ukraine, right? And the divisiveness of how people are responding there. And the fact that very similar things are happening in the Tigray region of Ethiopia now, and people aren't talking about that, right? And so, I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. And I love the mystery. And you know, I mean, I got it enshrined on myself through my favorite Beatles lyric, right? Like, we don't know all the answers, right? And part of life is sitting in the fact that we don't know the answers and positioning ourselves in a place of curiosity and inquiry, right, towards how life will unfold. And what I love about where you're at with your word is that you have been so challenged in your assumptions about how it will show up. We both always do, right? That always shows up for us. But you had your discipline had such a plan. Your discipline communication blend had a plan for how this was going to show up. And you could have technically still adhered to that plan, and you probably will, right? We're going to see stories probably come out a lot more than what we've seen so far, right, in this first quarter of the year. But what I love is the unexpectedness. And instead of, right, being frustrated or disappointed in yourself for not churning out stories on the timeline that you want, which I'm sure you've experienced, right? You're allowing yourself to be in a place of mystery and acceptance of the unknown, which is just shifting your demeanor to positivity, like coming full circle to optimism, right? To a place of, gosh, that wasn't what I expected, but instead of being disappointed and let down and frustrated by yourself and turning that inwards towards criticism, right? You're saying, okay, what is this showing me and teaching me and revealing to me, right? And how is this then going to manifest moving forward?
Yes. And it was so unexpected. I thought about that too. You know, where I probably beat myself up most is where I've given my heart. And I don't just mean that like in marriage or romantic relationships, I mean that's how I show up.
Yeah.
I show up
in
with
work
heart.
and in
I'm
friendships.
That is
Yep.
1,000% me. That's
Yep.
who I am. And I think where I've beat myself up over, especially the last year, 2 years, is feeling foolish and stupid. Those are the two words I can get really hung up on. I feel foolish. I feel stupid. I should have seen this. I should have known this. I should have made better choices. Where I think a lot of healing has happened for me is that those choices were the right choices for me. They were the right choices. They may not have turned out the way that I expected, but they were the right choices because the ripple effects of those choices have brought a lot of amazing things.
That's good.
I have loved witnessing my 2 kids who have struggled with anxiety in the past lean in and say, all right, gonna give this a go. My bougie Sunday brunch, living in a studio apartment daughter is now spending her weekends at the farm. Like, these things are just completely unexpected because they let their hearts lead.
Wow.
And so I'm not going to doubt that about myself anymore. And if it, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? I feel like I've already experienced it with heartbreak. Like, what's the worst that can happen if I let my heart lead again and I just, okay, here we are again.
I am.
But instead of like putting a label around your heart makes mistakes, just recently I'm like, your heart knows the way. So maybe not everybody stays on your path. Okay? You're still headed in the heart direction that matters for you.
That's good.
I think 8-year-old me led that way naturally, confidently. She was not doubting, but she loved what she loved. And I'm 40 years past that self, basically. And just returning.
I love that. I love that. So tell me, given the difference between self-esteem and self-confidence that you brought up in the Simple Abundance reading, tell me about that distinction within you. And I think the fact that I'm curious because a lot of your strengths lend themselves to external validation that then supports self-confidence, right? Your input that looks to sources and information, your empathy that leads on other people's emotions, right? Your woo that feeds on other people's energy, right? Like social energy. And so tell me how in this season, right, in a very healthy place, you keep talking about your gut, right? Like, what are you leaning on and where's that confidence coming from and how is it manifesting given the fact that so many of your strengths gain their confidence from external sources to the self?
So you're not going to believe this when I say this. I have wondered about taking it again.
Okay, we need to stop the recording there because that's blasphemy. Okay.
It is blasphemy, and because I know it's blasphemy. And
Yep.
thank you, Shane Lopez, for reminding me all the time, a lifetime's not enough time.
Yep.
I have thought about this. I'm just saying I've thought about it. I want to give credit to the fact that a lot of people do because of the same sort of thing.
100%.
I think what I've learned, Tess, is the value of best practices in resting strengths. I believe that my woo and empathy can so quickly go out of balance that I have really forced to learn solitude that I had never experienced before. I have literally been surrounded by human beings my entire life until now. Sean and Shanna left on Sunday and I had quiet and I was like, I need this. I have gotten used to probably more solitude than being around people. I mean, prior to what I'd say kind of the last year, I mean, unless I was going to a concert, my bubble was pretty darn tight, and I was working from home and I was by myself most of the time. So I don't know that I'd ever gotten to practice that. So I think my strengths now look healthier and more confident because they actually get to be used as tools instead of default behavior. I get to turn woo to an 11 by choice. And I know what I need to balance it out. My empathy has shown me over the years that my boundaries are terrible. And I got lots of practice in failed relationships to learn that. But then I'm in this place of solitude, forced reflection, that I was like, okay, if I'm really brutally honest with myself, if you're just brutally honest with yourself, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, what are your character flaws? What are your, character strengths? Like, really, if you're brutally honest with yourself. Top of that list was, your boundaries suck, Allison.
Yep.
You are a people pleaser. You are absolutely, you love attention. Girl, get a handle on it. And once I was brutally honest with myself, but again, forced, in this solitude place, I was like, oh, well, what does this look like in balance? What does this look like if I really use it for good? And so I think self-esteem has always been an issue for me, self-worth. But it's ironic that I got alone and I found a connection to appreciating myself.
Yeah.
Isn't that bizarre?
It isn't, actually, when you think about it, right? Because your strengths lend themselves to inundation from all of these external sources, right? And you were put in a position where a lot of those were cut off. You couldn't feed off people's social energy. You couldn't feed off their emotions, right? You were in a place and a condition and a context in life in which a lot of those became disconnected by choice and by circumstance, right? So what happened then, Allie, was you were in a context in which you probably for the first time became connected to true self, right? Became connected to authenticity because those voices were, if not silenced, dulled extremely from what they normally have been in your life. And so it makes sense that you have a greater appreciation and love and understanding of yourself, because when you were, in a place previously where you had all of these other voices and opinions and information sources, your strengths lent themselves to putting those in a place of priority over what your gut, what yourself, what your true being, stripped of all of those things, was trying to tell you, right? It was like you listened to those voices and the voice of your own self then became so repressed because those became a priority consistently in your life. And so it makes sense, right? That this is the kind of context in which you have come to a place of understanding and appreciating yourself and gaining self-confidence, because you were forced into a context in which you didn't have those other voices, and it allowed you to tune up your true voice. And now that you know that that's part of how your best self comes out, is connection to your own self and your own being, it allows you then to prioritize that voice equally or above the other voices, right? They're still going to be important. They're always going to be important to you because of who you are and how you're wired. And that doesn't mean that anything is wrong or different. You just have a different path to self than other people do, right? And so I love that. It's like you know what frequency to tune into now. So you can tune into that frequency, right? You know the other voices are there, right? Yes, equilibrium. You know the other voices are there, and you can switch channels and gain their input, right? But you've found the frequency that is yours. And so it's easier to get to now, right? You're not searching through, all of the,
I'm my own DJ now.
You are your own
what I was
DJ.
thinking about is, we talk a lot about a strength themselves, like as it sits alone, being front-facing, forward-facing, or I don't like to say backward-facing, but looking back-facing, looking
rear-facing.
rear-facing. So I don't like that word either.
Okay.
So we talk about that a lot. We also talk about strengths being more inward, or strength being more external, internal, external.
Yep.
So what I think would be a great question for our listeners is to take the equilibrium approach to their top 5 and say, okay, what does this strength look like facing forward? What does this strength look like looking back? What does this strength look like externally? What does this strength look like internally? Because, and again, thank you, Shane, for reminding me, a lifetime is not enough time to learn about my top 5. These are me. I don't need to take the assessment again. But sometimes I have to dive deeper into them to see their nuances at a different place or in a different container. This is a very different container for me because I am not living with I just externally processed something in my brain before it came out my mouth, but I'm going to let it happen.
I saw it on your face.
Wow, I bet. I am not living with nor living for someone else.
Wow. Snaps for that.
And that is a really phenomenal statement I just made that I'm glad I have recorded, that I can hear my own recognition of that. There are times where I don't feel 47, and so I think, I'm just getting started. And then I realize I'm 47, and I wish I'd have had this self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem at a younger me.
Yeah. That's good.
But I don't look back with regret. I look back as just, it's made me who I am and has brought these amazing ripple effects into my life. However, it's at times sad to me that it took so long. So learn from me, young pup. You don't have to because it's already internal. You know this.
I always learned from you. I love it.
But I think it's just kind of the epiphanies that come along the way are just so... This is what we talk about here.
Yeah.
This is not rocket science, but it is. It's like owning truth and owning the long path that it takes to get to a place of confidence and a place of best practices and a place of well-being and a place of equilibrium.
Yeah, I love it. I love the question too that you presented about like applying, I don't want to say equilibrium, I don't want to use my own word in the question, but applying balance to your theme, looking at your themes holistically. I would say like a holistic audit of your themes, right? Looking at how they manifest in every direction, every time orientation, all of the above, because it makes me think about my favorite ever strengths activity from Gallup, which is the talent map. And how I love the framework of the 4 domains of leadership, but they're limiting. They're reductive in their definition of the themes, and people take those and they stop there, right? And they say, gosh, my woo helps me to influence other people. But they don't critically assess the ways in which they can harness that tool to get things done, right? And to build meaningful relationships and to strategically and critically think about the world. And that was liberating for me because my strengths fall into only 2 domains in my whole top 10. And so it made me at first really question, I'm like, I have been in a lot of leadership positions. I am a very efficient person, but I don't have any influencing themes and I don't have any executing themes. So on paper, if I don't take a holistic approach to my strengths, it looks like I think and I can build relationships, but I don't really have the capabilities naturally to influence people or to get things done. And what I love about that exercise, right, is it takes every single one of your strengths, it has top 5 on there, but you can do it with your top 10 or whatever you have access to, your dominant themes as you define them. And it forces you separately to define how that theme shows up in each of the 4 domains. And that itself is liberating. That's a holistic assessment of the strengths too, because my context, while a love of history and is how I think in terms of maps and in terms of the past, it helps me build really good relationships because I know that people's lives and where they're at, who they are right now, and this has shown up so much in my friends in DC, whom I've only known for a few months and have multiple decades, in most cases 2+ decades of their entire lives before my life intersected with theirs, right? All of that history informs who they are. And I've loved the opportunity to get to know people and their histories because that helps me show up as a better friend and build relationships. It also helps me lead and, lead a research project, lead writing a section of a journal article that's going to go out, because I can think about all of the important and vital elements of history that have led to whatever the research question is that we're dealing with today. Like, what context do people need in order to accurately understand what we're trying to answer through this research? And then it helps me to get things done, because I'm constantly thinking about what's been done before and how our, so in essence, right, if we assess the forward-facing versus not forward-facing, however you want to name that, internal versus external, right, naturally context would be defined as a not forward-facing theme, right, and it would be defined as an internal theme. But in that verbal discussion that I just gave of context in the theme map and the domains, you can see how it easily helps me point forward, because it gives me a roadmap for where we're going based on where we've been. And it easily helps me to be external, because it's one of my greatest and one of the things I love most about how I'm wired. It helps me connect with people, because I'm really genuinely curious about where people have been. So I love that critical assessment of our themes, because it breaks it out. It breaks our themes out of the reductive definitions that they naturally find themselves in. We have to start somewhere, right? We have to start with some basic universal common definition of our themes in order for it to be a truly universal language of talent, like Gallup has designed it to be. But we cannot stop there, right? Because then we end up reducing people to one word, one domain, simplistic terms that don't fully encompass who we are as human beings. I get out my soapbox all day.
I think that's a perfect ending.
Okay.
This was an unpredicted conversation that yet made so many connections.
Yeah, for sure.
For me.
For sure.
Thank
I
you.
love that. Thank you. I think, so when we think about what we want our listeners to take away, I'd really love you to grapple with the question that we started with from the Simple Abundance reading, a really an understanding of what self-confidence is, and distinguish that from self-esteem, self-worth, self-image. So what is self-confidence, and from where do you derive it at this time in your life? You could name strengths, you could name the people around you, you could name, roles that you carry, however you are experiencing and defining self-confidence. I'm really curious, because I think it shows up, and we gain that from different sources. All of us do all the time. So that would be number one. Number two is this holistic audit of your strengths that we've talked about. So take a look at your top 5 themes, your dominant themes, your top 10, however you want to take this exercise, and really kind of write a holistic definition of it. So if it naturally is forward-facing, think about how it can help you be not forward-facing, help you examine the past or be very present. If it is more of an internal strength, I can think about my intellection, right? I'm going to challenge myself to say, how can I make my intellection a more external oriented strength this week? Consider doing the team map exercise, and I'll put a photo of that. I'll link that in our show notes as well, where you can break each of your top 5 themes out of its dominant domain to define it in the context of the other 3 domains as well. So I'm excited to see where people is very open-ended, but I'm very excited to see. I'd love, maybe someone with higher communication, maybe I'll challenge you to do this, Allie. If you were to write a robust, holistic definition of one of your themes, that's not the 2-sentence definition from Gallup. I know they have longer paragraph definitions. Don't go there. Write your own holistic definition of one of your themes, and I'll do the same. How about that? And we start next time. Okay, that'll be our accountability to this assignment. Wonderful, wonderful. Any other parting words for our people, Allie?
I think this was a great conversation again, unexpected. I miss this container.
Yeah, same.
I sometimes am so used to seeing you across Prairie Dog Village that when I am back in Prairie Dog Village and I look across the room, I'm startled when you're not there. So I'm so grateful that we still have this space.
Yeah, same. Me too. Lovely. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 94 of Genn and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. To interact with us and share the responses to the questions that we posed, the best way to do that is by giving us a follow on Instagram at Genn and Millie. That's at GENNANDMILLIE. Until next time.